I move around too much, so I don't think this particular one. Yes, I have a strange story to tell you this morning.
We like that.
An almost epic tale of Before I start, can I just ask for a quick show of hands? Who have you been collecting for more than 10 years? Ah, that helps. Then you may be familiar with this type of book. This image may be familiar to you. Because what happens after a while, if you've been collecting, it becomes so difficult to find something new and undiscovered. Really difficult. You ever heard from Wolfgang this morning? Really difficult, something new and gets you going. But sometimes a hidden gem can be closer to home than you imagine. Does anyone recognise this saying? The colour, the text and the style is a bit of a giveaway. Anyone recognise the words? Yes. Perhaps if I add in the famous voiceover.
Your eyes can deceive you, don't trust them. It's can deceive you, don't trust them.
Yeah. They're from the Jedi Master, Obi-Wan Kenobi, better known as Old Ben, in the original Star Wars film from 1977. I'll show you his picture. Yeah, this guy. That's Obi-Wan. By now, you must be thinking, what the heck has that got to do with lost scales? Well, it's got everything to do with this. Very uninteresting looking. Basic wooden Mannheim slide rule from around the 1930s. Yeah? Nothing very special. But it's something that my eyes mistook. But first of all, when it comes to slide rules, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise, size matters. Yeah? Because this is actually a Lilliput model. Yeah? I've got it here. I don't expect you to actually see it, but just to give an idea. Lilliputs are actually quite rare. They're one size down from a pocket slide rule. Yeah, one size down. This one, the D scale, is just about under 13 centimetres, but on some Lilliputs they can be as little as 10. So it sort of begs the question, being so ultra small, are they just horizontally challenged toys? I think it's more obvious that small is beautiful. Yeah, but having said that, most of the leading manufacturers did make these models, but they didn't list them in their catalogues. Don't know why. Most.
No, they put it in their advertisement because they sold advertisement on the back of it.
Right. But the normal catalogue, you won't find them. Other thing, paradoxically, most Lilliputs, mostly small ones, come from Japanese makers, which seems rather ironic in some ways. But it begs the question, who made this one? Okay. The name English Electric is in the well of the stock. But apart from that, there's no maker's mark, no logo, nothing to be found. And it's 1930s Lilliput. But we have a good clue.
Right.
Yeah, I'll try and highlight for you. These aluminium pegs used for pinning the solenoid facings to the stock mean it could only have been made by A.G. Thornton out of the UK. It's the only maker it could have been. So at least we know who made it. Yeah? What else was there? Oh yes, it's got a couple of reciprocal scales on the back of the slide. At this point, I should have remembered Obi-Wan's wise words.
Your eyes can deceive you.
Because my eyes mistook the scales on the back of the slide for inverse BI and CI scales. They're not. No. They're actually a very unusual combination of one logarithm, well, B1 and C1, that was how my eyes mistook me, but it's that one's logarithmic and one's linear. And they stayed miscatalogued in my collection for an awful long time. And this is why I ended up with having some lost scales, because I never knew they were there. I'd seen them, looked at it quickly, thought BI, CI, wrote it down, in the game, done. Years before I found out. So that's how I ended up having lost scales. So that's the first bit of why I came up with the title. Right, but actually, if you think, what could they be used for? I'm hoping none of you have ever seen a B1 and a C1 scale. You might be wondering, well, what on earth could they be used for? Actually, absolutely brilliant at calculating power factor efficiency in electrical circuits. Absolutely brilliant. Let's take it a little bit further. Now, this is my attempt at a 1-minute guide of what power factors are. Excuse me. In an electrical circuit, a number of attached devices, let's say a motor or a pump, they're attached and they draw current from a circuit. Ideally, that circuit, you'd like it to be set up so that the, as pointed out to you here, the voltage and the current cycles are aligned and fully in sync. That's what you'd like, that's optimum. In practice, it looks a bit more like this. Yeah? And one of the reasons, if you take a motor that's attached, when you start the thing up, it takes a while to get up to full speed, a motor. That causes a little bit of a lag here. And that delay means that the current and the voltage are no longer perfectly aligned. And in that case, you're actually wasting current. You're using more to drive the motor than is needed. It's just that it's not perfectly aligned anymore. Or if you like, the whole thing costs more to run. Okay, that's a little bit about power factor. Why have I told you that? Well, there's something called the power factor formula for efficiency in electrical circuits. And that's based on what I showed you there, of what a power factor is. Trying to judge how good is your circuit efficiently set up. You'd like it ideal, but it's normally just a little bit off. The question is, how much is it off? Yeah. So it's a big formula. In the presentations, I've tried to explain it. But I thought for this morning, rather than bore you with all that, you can read it if you're really interested, it would be better to show it, especially as we're in Italy, as an espresso coffee. Yeah? Or, if you prefer, a glass of beer. The basic principle I'm trying to cover here is that all of us only want to pay for the coffee. We don't want to pay for the froth. Yeah? That's just, And if you put that into electrical terms, that's known as reactive power. In other words, the wasted current, because the circuit isn't optimally set up. Yeah? Remember the froth. That's important. Okay, now to show you how the slide rule does these calculations so brilliantly, I need to replace now the coffee with a triangle. And the reason I have to use a triangle is I want to show the formula trigonometrically. Yeah. Because when I now bring back the lost scales, that's here, the BI scale is actually specifically designed for calculating the power factor. That is specifically done for doing that. And power system engineers, when they're trying to optimize and get their circuits ideal, like the ideal picture you saw, or optimize them, they try and get that power factor angle as small as possible. It's efficiency. If you like, as close as possible to 1. That's what they need to do. Perhaps a worked example now might help rather than me just saying it. Let's bring back that image we saw earlier. And just let's say that shows a power factor ratio of about 0.7. The sort of question a power system engineer might ask is, what do I need to change in the reactive power, the froth? Yeah? What do I need to do to raise this power factor ratio from a pretty poor 0.7 to 0.85. What do I need to do? When I bring in this slide, will make this ridiculous to do the calculation needed to answer that question. Step 1. We align 0.7 on the B1 scale under the right-hand index line. Yeah? We follow that up by moving the cursor hairline over 0.85. One would like to have. That would be much more efficient. I'm actually nearly done. Because all we need to do now is move the index line, the left-hand index line of the slide here, under the cursor hairline. Very well. Right, so I bring up the answer. The answer is 40 on C1. Simple as that. Now, if we put that into perhaps more technical terms, what we're saying there, to change the existing power factor ratio of 0.7 to 0.85, you need to reduce the reactive power or the froth by 40%. Then you've got a more efficient cup of coffee and a more efficient electrical circuit. In practice, what would a power system engineer do? He'd normally add some kind of capacitance to the circuit to achieve this reduction. See some nods here. You're all ahead of me probably on most of this, yes. Okay, but the principle here was to show you how brilliant it is at doing those calculations. I must be honest, and a lot of you will probably nod your heads again, this is a fairly simple power factor calculation. Most of them are more complex, more factors get in there. But all of them can be done with just these two scales. You don't need anything else, and in fact you're only using the index lines of the stock. You don't need the rest, it's just the index lines of the stock. All can be done with just those two scales. Okay. So that explains the lost scales, but where the hell did the unknown riches come from? There's got to be something in there about unknown riches. Well, the clue is in the well of the stock. Here, I think this was there, this bit. Because in 1938, a certain Albert John Riches, while working for UK industrial manufacturer English Electric, was granted a full patent for the B1C1 power factor scale layout. The only problem I had, it's very difficult to find anything about this guy. I really tried hard. I had local newspapers around the English Electric where I put adverts, but very little. But eventually, I got him on a photo. This is a great photo. 1963, it's actually a long-service award ceremony at English Electric for personnel who have worked 40 years for the company. And Albert Riches is one of the gents there. The only problem is that with the award ceremony and the photograph, they listed all the award winners alphabetically. So that means I know he's there, I just don't know which one he is. And I expect by now several of you are already ahead of me. This is how, to me and this meeting, I ended up having the lost scale of an unknown riches. That's it. Obviously, that made for a good storyline, but some seriousness to go back into it. Those special scales, B1C1, I do presume most people have never seen them. Which begs the question, were they ever used? Were they ever needed? And we can have something exotic, but just someone thought of brilliant things. I mean, if you go into the patent office, lots of people are patenting things, but brilliant, but just never got around. So it begs the question, okay, you've got some special scales, but were they good for anything, really, in practice? It's always kind of an interesting question in our collecting area. As it happens, power factor calculations were and still are an important way of judging electrical efficiency, still today. So it wasn't a question you said, no, it was superseded by something else and you didn't need them anyway. In fact, it's the other way around. They're still used today. So, but we know lilliputs are rare by themselves. So it's sort of, it very much raises the question, well, if these scales were still needed, why weren't they more used? I think it's more of a case of a missed opportunity, as I'll try and show you in a minute. Because although you may not have seen them, the natural reaction is, surely there are other slide rules, just never noticed, or there's something similar on other slide rules. It's rarely that I can say it, but they're actually, as far as I can find out, absolutely unique. There's no other slide rule, not only with them, but with anything like them. The one exception, and it's not really an exception, Thornton brought out a plastic version later. So the one I've got is from the 1930s. This one is actually dated from 1959. But there are no other ones that have these scales. So that sort of leads to the next question. Because what happened from the 1930s and onwards to do such calculations, because they're still being done today. And if someone had a slide rule and they didn't have the rare Lilliput, what would they have used to do the calculation? Because it's a formula, and the formula can be done. There is probably one scale that they might have used. Does anyone recognise it? Can you see it? It starts up here and runs down to... Anyone got it? P, yes. It's the Pythagorean scale. As with any formula, you could do it lots of ways. But in fact, it's this scale that's, if they were looking for one for that kind of calculation, this is the scale to use. Having said that, even with that one, that power factor calculation is really quite tricky. Nothing like the simple one I showed you. It's really quite difficult, but that will be the scale that you'd use. And in fact, at the IM2016, Bob Adams published the benchmark paper on electro slide rules. Power engineer using electro slide rules. And the reason, on his ideal but never made slide rule, power factor calculations are the reason why he included the P-scale, for that reason. So you'd expect most of the electro models we all love and have loads of, the electro models from perhaps Cell, Aristo and Nesta, would all have a P-scale. That Bob knew exactly why he wanted it on there. They don't. I'll let you check when you get home. But any of the favourite ones, typical electro models, they don't have the P-scale. I had to look quite hard. This is a Romanian-made version that does have the P-scale. Yeah, electro model. So that was quite interesting. And of course, begs the following question. Well, if the typical model of choice for a power system engineer would have been an electro model, we know the Lilliputs, not going to be found by many of them. What did they use? Well, in fact, let's grab it. Most of them would probably have used something like this, a special slide chart for calculating power factors, because they had nothing else and they needed to do it. Now, they didn't have the rare Lilliput, and their favourite electro didn't have the P-scale. So these are the sort of things that they've used. Now I want to bring you right up to date. Because today, the Lilliput power factor slide rule would be a bestseller. An absolute bestseller. Because these days, electrical efficiency is really big business. To sell an electrical device or any white household goods, you need these days to have a positive star rating. Perhaps some of you are familiar, think like the Energy Star. This shows how much electricity is used on the device. And if you're buying a new household, something for the kitchen, you look which one uses the less electricity, especially if you're green-minded, and you have ratings like this. In fact, there's also a very stringent international standard, 61000, specifically for electrical efficiency. And in some countries, this standard here is already mandatory, but only some. And you may have already guessed it, this standard includes the power factor efficiency. Yeah. Okay. So, I should say, do look out for lilybuds in your collecting. Now, they are quite special, especially if you can find them with these power factor scales. But as I started with some wise words from Obi-Wan, I thought I would go for a George Lucas style big finish and some more words that Obi-Wan could have said. Do not be misled by the scale of the inverse. It is just the power factor of the force. Thank you very much. Thank you. The music does stop, I promise. Yeah. Of course, I'll take any questions you have. Oh, sorry.
I can try to speak up. Never mind, I think I can speak up. So, Dave, this is a mistake.
A masterly presentation when it comes to the way it has been given, and I must congratulate you. It's really very effective in conveying the message. Unfortunately, I have some doubts about the message. The first question I have is about the fact that electro-slide rules don't have a p-scale, unless the red example that you showed.
A couple of others, but yes, yeah.
But they have the cos-phi scale, and the cos-phi is exactly the cosinus of that angle. So if you want to calculate how far from ideal certain city that is, you use the cos-phi scale, and that is also consistent with the terminology that is normally used in electrotechnic textbooks. Okay, so when you say cos-phi, you immediately think of the power factor, and knowing that you could improve the power factor from 0.7 to 0.85 leads to an improvement of 40%. I wonder if it is of much use, to be honest, with all due respect for British content. The other objection I have, or question, is that you showed some mostly household apparatuses that have a certain efficiency, but in this case I think this is not exactly the same thing. In the sense that if you have an ideal circuit which is just made by a big resistor, okay, you will have a power factor of 1, so absolutely the best.
Yeah, great.
But accepting the case when you want to heat up your house with an electric stove, there is no other use for it. I think in this case the efficiency is rather how little the losses due to resistances are. So the smaller resistor, the smaller the losses, the better the apparatus is able to perform his task. So I think it's a bit different. Also the table you showed about the IC had to do with harmonics.
Yes, it does.
So it's something different. It's not the fact that there are harmonics means that it is not the same. It means that the waveform, for any reason, is different from the simple sinus. And it could be something tending to a square wave or whatever, and that would be in conjunction with the presence of harmonics. Okay. So I think maybe we think the importance of those things. I agree with you, it's a brilliant thing. I am also curious to understand how did you come up with the discovery of the function of those two scales. But I have some reserves about the use of them, and this could explain why we don't see them anymore.
Okay, I'll try and respond to all those things there. The last one first. The first thing was discovering I got something I didn't, it was different than what I thought it was. I was redoing the slide rule for my website, and I looked at it, oh, but it's not BICA. Then that was B1C1. I thought, well, I don't even know what that is. And it was actually Bob Adams who put me on the cube of the power factors. So that's the last question. I'll try and now go back to your first question. You're right, there are some scales for that cosine which could be used. They tend sometimes to be shortened scales. So that's why when I sort of tried to say what scale, if you don't have something that's not around very much and nobody's ever seen, what would be the most likely candidate? And that's how I came up with the P scale. But you are right, the candidates of cosine, Thornton's got them, some other people do them, but they tend to be shorter versions. You get a little scale in the middle, and it's not always easy to use. So again, my premise was, this one was so much easier. I definitely haven't got your knowledge, but I do know one thing about the power factors, which may reinforce my message that they're important. In some countries, some commercial and industrial users now get fined if they don't have efficient setups. And what they have in the meters for the industrial users, there's a power factor in the meter. And if they go, you can say around about 0.9, usually, 0.9, 0.95. If they don't hit that, they get fined. In other words, their bill is bigger. That's industrial and commercial users. That's happening now. So the power factors are very relevant. And just as a little finish, because I know what goes right in, that's commercial industrial. It might not be too long before it's in your home, because the meters in your home can easily be extended for a power factor efficiency ratio, and you may end up paying more for all the inefficient equipment you have at home. You heard it here first. Okay. Sorry, got time, I think it's...
Perhaps we have some time for other questions. If you are interested.
Was that right? Sorry,
yes, there is just a final remark, excuse me if I...
Yeah.
Take advantage of everybody's patience, but about the thing that you just said, you are absolutely right. And that has also to do with the fact that now I would like someone more competent than me might correct me, because this is not exactly my field of competence, but if the power factors are too low, then besides transporting the current, which is not useful, there can be also disturbances to the distribution network. I see Thomas says yes. Okay. So that's important also for the utilities companies. And I'm not astonished that. Also, another thing is that nowadays the meters, probably if you have to do with voltages and currents which are significantly out of phase than in current problems.
I'm drawing a blank right now, but I have a number of these small celluloid slide rules from France. Most of them have advertising on the back, both for European and American companies. But I have one that is an electrical slide rule. And have you seen that? I mean, I have not looked at it.
That's one more in make electrical.
Yes.
That's electrical number 5. But it doesn't have any doesn't have it. No, it doesn't. Another one in. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much.